The food industry is going through a period of massive innovation and disruption. And today's guest is leading the charge. Dan Kurzrock is the co-founder and chief grain officer of Upcycled Foods, Inc. What started as an opportunity to repurpose waste from dorm room beer brewing has evolved massively over the past 14 years. Upcycled Foods powers the B2B upcycled food economy with product development expertise, cutting-edge technology, and a growing portfolio of ingredient solutions. Their upcycled products close the loop on some of our food system's most overlooked and undervalued supply chains, while delivering on taste, nutrition, and functionality. The company launched with regrained supergrain, which has catalyzed the growth of the upcycled food industry. Dan is a leading expert in food system sustainability and the upcycled food economy. He is also a co-founding board officer of the nonprofit organizations Upcycled Food Association and Upcycled Food Foundation. His iterative founder journey and insights into the food system we are all a part of are sure to both inform and inspire you as much as they have for me.
If you enjoy what you hear, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share Confessions of a Founder wherever you get your podcasts. Your support helps us bring more stories of resilience and innovation to listeners like you. So grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's dive in to today's Confessions of a Founder.
Dan, welcome to Confessions of a Founder. It's such a treat. You are the only founder that I'm interviewing, actually, that I've known from childhood days.
I am honored to be here, Allie, and I've got probably a lot of confessions to make. So I'm looking forward to seeing what tough questions you're bringing forward. And thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So first, can you share with us what you're currently building, and then we'll get into kind of the evolution of how you've gotten to where you are now.
Yeah, so I'm building a food company. The food company is called Upcycled Foods Incorporated, and we are obsessed with the idea of how we can build a more circular economy. And what I mean by circular economy is, this is not to throw out too many buzzwords or anything like that, but it's kind of redefining how we're thinking about the way food is made. So the traditional process is what's known as the linear economy, where we extract a resource, we make something with it, and whatever we're not using gets wasted. And in a circular economy, what was once maybe the end is actually the beginning of another process. And so it's this shift in mindset that makes a heck of a lot of sense, we think, in a situation like we are here on planet Earth, where we've got dwindling resources and a lot of amazing food and nutrition that we're producing that unfortunately we're just not doing the most with. So our company is all about trying to reimagine food loss and food waste, and we can get into what that means exactly. It's not dumpster diving, but help close the loop on that value that's really being left off the table today. And we do that by selling ingredients to other companies that are made from what would have otherwise been a food loss stream, like the grain that a brewery has already used to make beer. And we also work with companies on looking at the food and beverage products they're making, and if there's an opportunity for a co-product, from that can be done. So that's what we're all about.
And let's back up a little bit. Can you tell us where you're from, how you got into this entrepreneurial mindset that took you to your first startup?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so grew up in the beautiful San Francisco Bay Area, and grew up in a community in which we really valued, natural resources and sustainability and all this, which I actually later learned, was something that I'd taken for granted. Because what happened is I went down all the way from Northern California to Southern California for college, and as a good underage college student, as wont to do, I decided to learn how to make beer. And so I started making beer at the age of 19. And in that process, I, started using a lot of barley malt. So the core ingredient in beer making, there's 4 ingredients. There's grain, there's water, there's hops, and there's yeast. And it's about a pound of grain for every 6-pack. And then at home, it would have been like coffee grounds. It goes into the vegetable garden, which then becomes delicious tomatoes, right around this time of year. But in that college environment, we didn't have a compost bin, let alone a vegetable garden. There was just a dumpster. And so every time I was making beer, I felt like I was making food and then throwing away that food. And so this was 2009, 2010. There wasn't as much awareness about food waste like we have now. Around 2014, it came out that about 40% of all the food that we're growing is going to waste. To me, it just felt like common sense, and it was a bit of a wake up call. Like, oh, this is going into a trash can. At home, this would not be going into a trash can. And so I had the really it was a pretty humble original idea, which was to take the grain from the brewing and make bread with it, which there's a lot of human history around making bread from these grains from brewing, sell the bread, and then use the money from that to buy more ingredients to make more beer. And maybe someday I could have a restaurant that was a brewery and a bakery, and it could be this really cool example of like closed loop thinking. And one thing led to another, and here we are today, working with major retailers and brands as an innovation partner, trying to actually do like we're doing what we had started doing originally at a much bigger scale. You can go into grocery stores today and buy bread that are fortified with this regrained ingredient. But it all started from this this origin of just making beer at home and trying to figure out what to do what was left with it.
So you started making beer, you started making bread. Where did it go from there?
Yeah, so that was a couple years of just what I call recreational entrepreneurship. So the idea was just to have a one hobby sort of funding the other hobby. And as it was happening, around the time that the craft beer was actually really exploding in the U.S. There was about 2 new breweries opening per day. In a place like San Francisco, where I found myself after college, there was more breweries than neighborhoods. And while I originally set out to think about maybe start adding to that number with another craft brewery and talking to these breweries, I realized that they were dealing very much with the same challenge that I had been dealing with as a home brewer, where every time they made beer, they were filling much bigger containers of this nutritious, fragrant grain that they just had to pay someone to haul away. And so the idea got bigger. I was like, oh, well, maybe we can help these breweries out and take that material and do what we were doing with our own products. But then on the other side, downstream, realize there's a lot of food companies that are trying to make more products that are better for the planet and have more nutrient density. And the barley, after it's been used to make beer, is all protein and fiber. It's a really nutritious ingredient. And so the lights kind of turned on and realized that maybe the opportunity was actually to try and connect the dots between the breweries who have this potentially really valuable food ingredient and the food companies who are looking for ingredients like that. And so that was the kind of the next aha moment, I guess, that then led to a whole bunch of other questions and challenges, such as how do we process this stuff at any sort of meaningful scale? I mean, a pound for every 6-pack in the U.S. that adds up, back to napkin math, is like 20 billion pounds per year of this brewer's grain. It's very wet, kind of like an oatmeal, so it spoils very quickly. No one knows what it is. But we were heartened by examples like, if you are familiar with whey protein, WHEY, that's actually made as a co-product of cheese making, and there's examples of things like this that have just happened because of common sense, but there's also a lot of examples where common sense has failed us. And the kind of business as usual follows the path of least resistance instead of the path of highest value. And we end up in a situation where, every time we're producing beer, we're leaving a lot of nutrition off the table. And the scope has just gotten bigger and bigger since then. I mean, now everywhere we look, we see opportunities for upcycling. Another one of my favorite examples is coffee. Everyone drinks, not everyone, but many people drink coffee in the morning, right? And the coffee that we're consuming is actually like really the pit of a fruit, the coffee bean, as we call it. It's the center. It grows in the center of a fruit. That fruit has really interesting food application opportunities. The coffee plant itself and the leaves, on on the tree or the bush, depending on how it's pruned, is like really rich in antioxidants and has great flavor as a tea. So it's like where are we losing track of like making the most of of what we have, and that's kind of where our business just increasingly focused over time.
So you start to come up with this idea. How do you know that you have product market fit for something that can be commercialized to start?
How do we know that we have product market fit is a great question. That the answer is that we just started doing it. Honestly, Allie, this is maybe where we get into the confessions, right? Where we thought the idea was good. We weren't really sure. And so what we wanted to do was, we were college students. It's not like we had money to invest in market research or any real formal way of testing product market fit. We made sure that we were familiar with the principles, of that, and then decided to start just making and selling products. So like the bread, was something that for us validated that people were really interested in the story, of what we were doing. We would be able to sell fresh loaves of bread, and people liked it, and we'd have repeat customers. But the problem with bread is the next day it's not fresh bread anymore, and it also takes a really long time to make. So we're like, okay, this is there's a seems to be a market for this, but maybe this isn't the right product to build a business around. And so we did an early pivot to, instead of making bread, we started making granola, and we started making nutrition bars, which we could make more of at one time and had a longer shelf life. And we just did a lot of iterating like that. And also with our messaging, the grain after it's been used to make beer in the industry is referred to as spent grain. It's got nothing left in it. It's been spent. And it's actually kind of the opposite of that. It's much more nutritious after. And it's a super grain. And so, but how do we talk about that? Do we talk about saving the grains or repurposing the grains or recycling the grains, or we talk about eating beer? We came up with this tagline, "Eat beer." And so we just did a lot of test and learn, and we tried to do it in a way where we were generating revenue through those tests, which we could then reinvest back into the business. If I were to start a fresh business today, I don't know that I would take that approach. But as a young, passionate entrepreneur, it was just trying to figure it out, that iterative process of trying to kind of maybe stumble our way into product market fit in the very earliest of days. That's how we did it.
What did the team look like in those first couple of years?
It was myself and a childhood friend, Gordon Schwartz, as co-founders. And then we were very fortunate to just rope in different friends and family to help us when it was in those days of recreational entrepreneurship. It wasn't until, so we graduated from UCLA in 2012, and then moved back up to the Bay Area, formally registered the business. We did our first external sales event at the Kern County Nut Festival in 2013. We were a registered home kitchen at that time. So that was really still in that side hustle realm of business building. It wasn't until 2017 that we hired our first employee. So we really took our time in those early days to try and figure out if we had a real idea. We knew it wasn't going to be a super rapidly scaling tech company or something like that. This is the physical economy, and it takes a lot of time, and we knew that we had a lot to learn as individuals and leaders. And so we took it really slow, in the beginning, and just tried to kind of let see how it would unfold, but also try to create as many opportunities for us to be lucky, as possible along the way, by saying yes to different things like the Kern County Nut Festival, which was very random, and it was a very low risk way for us to get out there and see if people other than friends and family would be willing to, try these products and what messaging worked with them. And so, it was just myself and childhood friend initially, and we're still a small company, but that's what the early days looked like.
And then where does it become a little more official entrepreneurship in your eyes?
So my journey with it, everyone's got their own journey with this. For me, I decided in 2014, so just a couple of years after college, I had a real job, as I like to joke. I was working gainfully employed, and was doing this on the side, nights and weekends, and we'd make a bunch of we were still making the product ourselves at that point. We were doing that like one weekend to make the inventory. We'd sell it the next weekend, set up a website. We started doing some research with the USDA around solving some of the kind of technological hurdles of what we were doing. And I decided to go to grad school to do a sustainable MBA program because I think I wanted a couple things. One, I think I wanted an excuse to be able to go focus on my business, but in a way that also felt like I was both increasing the probability of success for that business by kind of investing in this program and myself in that, and then maybe decreasing my personal risk. Like maybe it doesn't end up working out. At least now I have an MBA and can go figure out what to do with it from there. So that was kind of the next step towards making it, transitioning from recreational entrepreneurship to like maybe professional entrepreneurship. And my goal was by the time I finished that MBA program in 2016 to have a business that was viable and as an investment proposition to professional investors who could take it to the next level. So I've spent those 2 years with every project I could, focusing on the business. I was very fortunate to get to work with some very smart peers and friends, some of which I still work with today, most of which I'm still friends with today. And then, by the end, we like won a pitch competition. We ended up finding some of our first investors, and that's when grad school ended, and my side hustle became my full-time job then, which was kind of late 2016, early 2017.
What was the process of fundraising like the first time around, and what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned through raising capital the first time that you've then employed for future rounds?
We were very non-traditional in how we approached raising capital. And again, like this is something where if I were to start another business today, like a second business, for example, I wouldn't necessarily go back and do it the same way. But I think at the time, it's what made the most sense. So the first thing we were trying to do was to see how far we could get just with revenue, with revenue and reinvesting profits back into the business. And so really the first external funding we did was what was then referred to as rewards-based crowdfunding. And so we did, most people would remember like Indiegogo and Kickstarter. We did it on a platform called Barnraiser, but same idea, where we were raising money to do something specific. We were looking to order our first round of printed packaging, so that we could then professionalize our look and enter broader distribution with a consumer product that we were making in order to build the market for the broader idea. And we raised about $30,000 doing that, which was more than we were expecting to. And technically that, goes on the books as revenue, but it was kind of the first external funding that we received because it was like a pre-order, for what we were doing. From there, we did like an angel, kind of more of I guess a classic angel investor type of approach. Starting with friends and family, and seeing how far we could get with that. But just really trying to get our vision in front of as many people as possible, and see if we could find some that believed in it, wanted to be in early parts. We're talking $10,000 checks. We kept that open as a rolling close, which is maybe the non-traditional part of it. So traditionally, a founder might go out and say, "Hey, we're going to raise $1 million or $500,000, and this is when we're going to start the round, and this is when we're going to end the round." And we really were cautious about raising too much money too early, probably to a fault, honestly. But that was kind of our mindset at the time, and so we were trying to raise.
Why were you cautious?
We'd seen and heard of case studies, particularly as it relates to like mission-driven founders and getting kind of over their skis, with when you get too much money in, sometimes there's like strings, attached to it, and maybe you give up a board seat, and maybe that board seat results in giving. And this is doesn't happen in every case, but there's maybe some anxiety and kind of fear, of that as a founder, because we really knew that we wanted to build a business that had the mission at its core. We weren't yet a public benefit corporation, which we are now, which is another way of protecting that mission. And we didn't want to be pressured to try to grow. Maybe the cleaner way to answer that is sometimes when you raise money, depending on who you're getting it from and how much it is, there's expectations for growth at a certain speed. And we felt that while we were onto something very real, like this was going to be a long-term play. And we were worried that we would be kind of pushed to fail quickly if we got too much capital in too early that had an expectation of getting, because anytime you get money in, there's an expectation that money is going to come out. So that was, I mean, it's been, what year is it now? 2024. It's been 7 or 8 years since we were, in that mindset, but kind of transporting myself back to that time. I mean, that's how we were thinking about it. And we extended that to this idea of doing equity-based crowdfunding. We loved the idea of having a lot of people write small checks and kind of democratize our mission and our ownership. So that was an aspect of how we fundraised. And then another thing that we did that was kind of weird too, as a early stage business, was we aligned with some corporate strategic capital early on. And for those who are unfamiliar with the jargon that are listening, there's professional venture capital where there's a fund, where they're investing in businesses, but then there's also businesses that will make investments into other businesses that are strategically relevant to them. And we aligned with some corporate investors that represented different parts of what we had defined as our value chain. So a company like Barilla, for example, is an early investor in ours. They're the pasta company that most people know. They invested at an angel investor level, and the cash was great. But what was extra valuable about that was that we actually got to work with their team and get an understanding of how they think about sustainable product innovation and getting that perspective kind of on the inside of what we're doing. We saw an opportunity to try and do that in a couple different places. So that was another source of capital for us in the early days. But it was all what's called minority positions in the company. So we were raising relatively small checks in at different periods of time, depending on what we were trying to do.
I so appreciate your candor about opening up the hood and showing us how the sausage was made. In this example, I used a lot of different metaphors all at once there. But I think the idea with that is that there are so many different ways to create a business and sustain it. And yet we see these stories oftentimes of, oh, this company raised $10 million and they closed their round in 6 weeks and they burned through the capital in 18 months and come back again. And that is not the reality for most businesses. And especially when thinking about how much you get to keep in equity, what the commitments are that you have to make, also some of the big trade-offs that I'm sure we're going to get into from a mission standpoint that are potential expectations of investors when you're going through the process. But I want to get back to, okay, so you've done a small raise. What was the vision at that point? And then how quickly did that evolve?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, wise comments. And for anyone who's listening who's thinking about raising money, the other thing that's important to acknowledge is that it is very different in 2024 than it was in 2017 or 2018. This was a period of low interest rates, and I didn't fully appreciate it at the time. But money was flowing relatively, not freely. That's not probably the right word to use because there's some literal implications of that. But it was the spigot was on, so to speak. And so, one of the concerns I have about entrepreneurs starting today is that, especially mission-driven founders, is that they're going to be maybe in a situation where it's more difficult to get capital from the source that you would prefer, whereas, it was maybe a little easier to do if you were intentional, about it back then. And this is affecting businesses of all stages. Maybe later on we can get more into what that's looking like if you'd like. I'll continue to be candid because I'm not interested
100%.
Not interested in doing anything else. But back then, so there's been a lot of evolutions of our business over time, as a business should. You should hold everything subject to improvement in all areas at all times. We believe. the core principle of what we're trying to accomplish then is the same, as now. Um, the way that we were thought that we'd get there was a little different. And so in the early days, I guess not the earliest of days, but this period that we're talking about where we're making pitches to bring in external capital or do equity financing, we were trying to build what we called like a hybrid business model where we had a consumer packaged goods like arm of the business and a ingredients arm of the business. And our thesis was that, and we were correct about this, that it would take time to build awareness about the ingredient, the Regrain Super Grain Plus ingredient, which is what we ended up naming it, trademarking that. That has all these benefits that we talked a little bit about, already, but is unknown. And ingredient sales cycles can take 18 months, 24 months, sometimes longer, in a business to business context. And that's too long. And there's also a chicken or egg situation where there weren't any proven use cases yet of anyone using our ingredients. And so we figured, okay, well, we can build a brand and we can use our brand to use our own ingredients. And that we hoped it would accomplish two things. One of those things, which was successful, was to establish awareness of the upcycling opportunity as a solution within food waste and the broader, climate crisis. And there was a lot of qualitative success, I would say, that we had in doing that. Plenty of trials and tribulations too. But the other thing that we thought that we'd do with our consumer brand was be able to sell more product, sell product today, basically, and then generate free cash flow from the product sales, which we could then use to sustain the longer sales cycles on the ingredient business. And while we were successful at launching a couple of different products and getting them into broad distribution, what we learned relatively quickly, but I wish we learned quicker, was that we were generating revenue but not profit from those efforts. And so it became a situation where we were out there and growing, but it wasn't actually delivering free cash flow for us to reinvest in the long-term strategy that we were doing. It was actually becoming a distraction. We didn't want long-term. Our thesis never was long-term to be a CPG, a consumer packaged goods brand that becomes the next Cliff Bar, or something like that. We always wanted like Cliff Bar, for example, to start using our ingredients. But we thought that it would be a means to that ends. In a lot of respects, it was. But, in the early days, we envisioned it as being this like integrated system where the consumer goods business was actually part of the fuel for the business to business ingredients business. And so that was what we were working on at the time, was this kind of split model, which on paper we thought sounded great.
But that's also a really small team to have two different go-to-market business models.
Yeah, there's probably 5, when we were like really in the thick of it, there was probably, 5 to 8 of us, depending on the time that we're working on that. And it was the consumer business was commanding a lot of our time, especially because we did some really dumb things in hindsight that were maybe noble in their intent, but foolish in hindsight. For example, we were making this nutrition bar, these Regrain bars, and the whole mission of the company is to reduce food waste. And we felt that we couldn't be contributing to packaging waste at the same time we were trying to reduce food waste. So we decided to do what nobody else was doing and put our product in a home compostable wrapper. Sounds great, right?
Sounds awesome in theory.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, the challenges with this material are that it's more expensive. Okay, we'll build that into our pricing. It's got longer lead times. Okay, we'll try to plan ahead longer. It, it had some of those kind of like tactical issues with it that we figured kind of this like punk rock attitude about it. The big companies just don't want to deal with this because it's more expensive, so we'll figure it out. What we didn't realize, and we didn't really have the money or the foresight to sufficiently test for this, was that there's actually some real functional issues with this compostable packaging. And we got the product into distribution. And while we did, of course, quality control, we were like keeping inventory of different production runs and testing them over time to make sure that like everything was all good, quality and safety. And we started getting reports from the field, from in distribution of product being stale on shelf, and like the codes matching up with product that we were tasting that tasted fine. And what we learned was that the product, when it got into like a hot distribution truck, it basically like lost its moisture because of the packaging that it was in. So ironically, we were creating food waste and losing money because of our choices on packaging. And so like learnings like that were part of what fed into the broader realization that we either need to be a brand or we need to be an ingredient company. Like it was too hard to do both effectively. And so that was I got so into that story that I kind of forgot the main point that I was making there. But I think it connected back to like, or maybe you can help me.
Yeah. What year, just so we can kind of stick to the timeline, what year was this in that you kind of had this whole realization, and how long did it take between launching the product to getting this feedback back and knowing how to adjust?
Yeah, we launched different versions of that bar starting in that first Kern County Nut Festival in like 2013, and we were using compostable packaging then, and then we stuck with it as we scaled up and even went to like a contract manufacturer where we weren't making our own product. We were working with another company to make it for us so that we could focus on the sales and marketing of it, because we're not a nutrition bar manufacturer, right? So I feel like it was 2018. Probably check our blog. We wrote about this pretty candidly, publicly, at the time. But it was, it wasn't until 2017, 2018 we started like rolling our product out into places like Whole Foods and Sprouts that we learned about this. And so that was around the time that actually maybe the smart thing to have done then would have been to say, okay, let's just refocus everything on the ingredients business. But we didn't feel like the marketplace was ready for it, so we decided to try to recognize that we couldn't do everything all at once, and that we're not a packaging company, and we can be passionate about sustainable innovations in packaging. And by the way, packaging science has come a long way, even in the last 7 years or so since then. So I don't want to discourage anyone from looking into compostable packaging, for example, but I do want to encourage everyone to do their diligence in terms of testing it in distribution. But so we decided to launch a new type of product and a new format, which we started developing in 2019, which was the regrained puffs, which were a savory snack that were just in a conventional bag, a different category, different usage occasion, and kind of try again, see if like maybe the type of product we were making wasn't right. And of course we ended up launching that in March of 2020, which was great timing. But that's maybe I'm getting ahead of our timeline, but that's where all of this kind of fit in with the packaging realization and the business. And we probably got our first business to business customer, first ingredient sale around 2020, 2021, something like that. But we had started to do a lot of the legwork for that as early as 2017, where we were doing trials with Barilla and with another one of our strategic investors, Upcycled Foods, and starting to get the ingredient product into the hands of professional product developers and get feedback from that to move everything forward. But it was clear that wasn't, while those opportunities were really big, it was clear that it wasn't going to happen quickly. And so we felt validated, in this thesis of, okay, well, we'll use the consumer brand as a way to kind of keep things moving forward.
You launched the puffs in March 2020. I've tried the puffs. They were really good. When did you decide to pause that part of the business and go full bore into the ingredient side of things?
Yeah. Well, so by the way, anyone who's listening to this who wants, is maybe running a snack company or wants to run a snack company, you can bring the puffs back. It's we have those available. They were really good. We wound down the puffs business probably mid 2021 towards 2022. It's hard to remember exactly because, as they say, time is a fickle mistress, and it's like, I don't really know exactly what happened and when. But somewhere, we did it for less than 2 years. I would say, where we went through the cycle of like having a bunch of retail launch commitments from major retail partners, pandemic descending, that disrupting all of that, us finding new launch partners, getting the product out there, and then experiencing the challenge of introducing a new product in a retail environment when you can't do things like in-store sampling, for example, which was always a really important way of getting people to try a product and then getting them to buy it at the store level, which is, by the way, a really expensive thing to do, but it was something you used to be able to do. You can probably do it. Sure, you can do again now. You definitely can do again now, but this was in a period of time where people weren't, they were shopping wearing gloves and masks, and they certainly weren't going to taste a product in the middle of their grocery store trip that they're trying to, move in and out of. And so it's just like the lights finally just turned on for us, where we realized that we could continue on this like Sisyphean task of trying to introduce these new products in this macro environment that was completely beyond our control and not very conducive to that. Or we could take a real hard look at what we were trying to be when we grew up and maybe make some hard decisions. Which the hard decision was, of course, that if we decided to stop selling consumer products, it's not like we had enough ingredient revenue yet for that to kind of like, we envisioned like kind of a soft landing, as it were. And instead we found ourselves in a situation where we were deciding, okay, well, let's like kind of pull the cord and, do an emergency maneuver, more abrupt than we had envisioned for ourselves. But it was the right call to make. No doubt. It was the right call to make. In hindsight, it probably would have been smart to have made the call a lot earlier, but that's how hindsight works. And we know that. And we don't, torture ourselves too much about what could have been.
And so how has that, so you have Brilla, you have another client that you brought in. Where does it snowball from there?
I mean, it's still ongoing. Like I have a mentor who said a line to me recently that I just have been cracking up about, which is that the only kind of overnight success is a good night's sleep. And, that's yeah. And even that's hard to come by a lot of times. Right. So, it's an endurance sport, building a business. So like our first, like probably really exciting B2B customer was a brand that was on Shark Tank called Dope. Punny, right? DOUGHP. They do edible bakeable cookie dough. They launched this flavor called Brownie Beast that was originally supposed to be just like a couple month limited time offer. Did really well. Now it's a core part of their offerings. You can still buy it on their website. Probably launched in 2021. And in the time since then, we've had a number of other, launches of products that use the regrained ingredient. The biggest one was with Kroger stores. So down by you've got Ralph's, which is being a part of Kroger, under their Simple Truth brand, like a line of sliced breads. And along the way, we'd also established some commercial partnerships with other business-to-business food companies that had synergy, I guess, to use the business jargon for what we were trying to do. So like Puratos is an example of that. They're a really innovative bakery ingredient company that specializes in sourdough flavors, for example, sourdoughs. And these sourdoughs work really well with our product and bakery applications. And so we started working together to introduce breads and bakery items. But that wasn't like, you wouldn't find those on the shelf in the first couple of years of that partnership, right? Because it's like, there's development that needs to happen. And, Kerry is another company that KERRY, that we aligned with, and we had met them earlier on, and they were actually helping us produce that snack product. And then we launched a protein crisp with them, which is using a similar process to the snack puff, but is more geared towards actually like nutrition bar customers, for example. And, each of these processes take anywhere from like a fast one is like 4 or 5 months. It's like really fast. So something like Dope was around that timeline. We did a collaboration with a pasta company called Semolina Artisanal Pasta. But, projects like, the bigger ones that deliver scale, take years to come to fruition. And so now we're in this really exciting moment right now where there's, a lot, we're starting to see more and more projects commercialize every quarter that we've been working on sometimes for years. Some of them are also small, like our friends at Act Bar, for example, that launched a nutrition bar using the regrained ingredient in it. So we're back in the bar game thanks to Act Bar, a really cool company. They donate a meal to I think it's the LA Food Bank for every bar that's sold. Love the social mission there. We've got a company making a multi-grain naan bread. They call it a mini naan, a Torias. Really, really great California-based bakery company that's like nationally distributed. It was on an exclusive with Misfits Market, and now is starting to be introduced to other retailers. An English muffin brand from the East Coast called Stone and Skillet launched a product with us, like, I don't know, a year and a half ago, something like that. I mean, I could keep going, but there's so we're starting to see things happen, and this is, again, like not an overnight success, right? And we still have, like, it's crazy to say this, but like, I still feel like the best is yet to come with what we're building. Even though, like, the business has really come a long way. We've got national brands launching our products. We have upcycling now recognized by the USDA and EPA together as like one of the top solutions, in the fight against food waste. And there's a whole like national strategy that was launched around food waste reduction. Like upcycling is named as that. We helped co-found with some peers and competitors an industry nonprofit called the Upcycled Food Association in 2019 that, there was just like 8 members to start. Now there's, over 200. And we developed a third-party certification standard that you could see like on the front of a package, at grocery stores. And there's now what began as maybe a movement, has now become like an actual, like a sector, or a subsector, in the food industry in a really exciting way. And it really still feels like the best is yet to come.
Your story, so we've just gone over 12 years of timeline. So when people talk about overnight success, I think it's important to think of the upcycleds of the world that are far more common than many of the crazy things that you hear out there on the internet. But a couple key things come to mind. The first is that's 12 years of every night your head hits the pillow and you don't know where this thing is going. A lot of uncertainty. Where do you gain that resilience from on a daily basis? And how has the process of going through this as an entrepreneur and your ability to handle the uncertainty gotten better over time?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I find peace in metaphor, meaning in metaphor, like I think a lot of people do. And I often think about the entrepreneurial journey as being an endurance sport, because it is this, you gotta pace yourself, and like you're like a endurance cyclist or something like that. You want to climb some mountain. You don't necessarily know when every turn is going to be on the way up, right? But you kind of have an idea of each section that you're doing, and you try to make sure that you can sustain all of that. And so, like, a key ingredient in that is personal sustainability. Like, you can't build a sustainable business, financial or otherwise, if you burn out. And so I'm very fortunate to have had some, good advice from other entrepreneurs, in an early time of just like, hey, there's the grind. It's possible to make the grind never stop and to burn the candle at both ends, but then you'll burn out. So you've got to make sure that you can perform as an endurance athlete, in this. And so for me, it's always been about trying to deliberately build balance, into my life. And I'm lucky to have a wonderful wife who I had back at the days of Jewish summer camp where you and I met, actually, who, has been with me, through all of this. And, what started with underage homebrewing. Now we have a child, and that's a whole other level of perspective and balance. But having relationships like that have absolutely been critical. And then, like, being outside, as much as possible. And like, when you're being an entrepreneur is an act of creation, it is a creative pursuit, and you need to stay inspired, in that. And for me, I've always found myself getting inspired when I create opportunities to like remove myself from the situation. So whether that's like a mountain bike ride or, um, actually like toiling in my garden, or something like that. Like having interests that are different. Reading fiction. I love to read nonfiction too, but like I read a ton of fiction, Allie, and like that for me is something that gives me a vital perspective and an energy, to take back to it, because you can always send another email. You could stay up all night sending emails, but the thing with them is that when you write to people, ideally, they tend to write back, right? So it's like that's nonstop. You have to like I've realized that you have to like create the rhythm that's sustainable for you. And so yeah, for me, some of that has been in these other pursuits, from sports to reading to being obsessed with music to making time with my family and all of that. If I can't be successful in business and keeping that balance, first of all, I don't think I'll be able to without that balance, as I was saying before, but like I'm also not interested in success in business if it comes at the cost of a meaningful life. And so that's what I really try to incorporate into my mindset.
What is the why that keeps you going every day?
I think there's a few things. One is just like, this has to work. I don't know that I don't know with certainty that my company is going to be successful in this, but the idea that we are wasting 40% of all the food that we're growing, and that there's nutrition, that's being left, like, it doesn't make sense. It's not a problem that's benefiting anybody. And there's not a lot of solutions to the climate crisis, and we need all the solutions acting in concert. But there's not a lot of solutions where there's a super clear business case and a super clear impact case that are actually like really well aligned in the same way that there is with food waste reduction, with upcycling specifically. And so I'm like, even just a purely intellectual level, like the fundamentals here make so much sense, and I believe it has to happen. I want it to happen faster, and I believe that we have a role to play in that. And so it's really like that fundamental mission of this reimagining food waste as a latent supply chain. That is why I'm able to answer the bell every day for this, and I'll probably elaborate with more corny perspectives as it relates to that. But yeah, it's that purpose, it's that mission, and it's that belief that this is going to happen. This has to happen. So how do we make it happen faster?
Hopefully, there are lots of current or future potential mission-driven founders out there. What are some of the biggest challenges that you can recommend that folks might anticipate as mission-driven founders versus founders who maybe don't have impact as a part of their day-to-day operations and values?
Yeah.
Because I think we both are mission-driven founders, right?
Yeah.
There is a difference.
Yeah, I love it. I want to flip like a lot of these questions. I wanted to like flip some of these back to you, because I'm curious for your take. I think one is that there is sometimes a misconception that it's mission, or that there's this mutual exclusivity of mission or profit. Just for one example, and I think that's bullshit. Honestly, I think there's a lot of ways to think to actually make the two work together. But that misconception can come into conversations with capital providers, for example, where maybe they are concerned that the commitment to the mission is going to come at the cost of shareholder value, or or something like that. And there's probably a whole podcast we could do talking about dealing with that. Another thing that maybe is more specific to mission-driven founders, although parts of this apply to any founder, I think, is that people want to help, whether and you should be willing and able to ask for help. Like, you don't need to know everything, as the founder. This is what's universally true of any founder. Your job is to try and find people that have seen the movie before and know who to go to for different questions, and know what you're best at, and where you need help, and all of that. But I think in particular for like mission-driven founders, it can open a side door, in places that maybe a non-mission driven founder, may not have that available to them, where you might be able to get access to whether it's advice or connections or whatever it may be, like being able to know what to ask for and being really forthright and asking for that help and being really upfront about what the mission is. Like some people will just want to help because they want to see your mission be successful. And so I think that's a real advantage that mission driven founders have that you should take advantage of from day zero.
So you just talked about 40% of food waste, reducing that number. I know I'm on the path of helping to reduce the third largest polluting industry of fashion in the world. A huge piece of this that's different than if you and I were talking about selling a lipstick or a hat, for example, is that you have to educate consumers on why changing their behavior is conducive to them and the planet and to investors as well, why this type of business model is actually super intellectually obvious, as you kind of alluded to before. But that's an extra challenge of having to infuse that education into your day-to-day operations and your marketing materials, all that kind of stuff. What has been the process of educating consumers looked like for you, and how has that evolved as you've learned which methods might be more effective than others?
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant learning process. I mean, a really important lesson in that has been to try and meet people where they are. Some people you just want to talk profit, and you can do that with a business like an upcycled business model. Waste is money, and risk. So there's ways, and you shouldn't feel like you're pandering, I don't think, as a mission driven entrepreneur when you cherry pick different aspects of your value proposition to different audiences. And at the consumer level, I think that also applies. So like one of the ways that my thinking on this has evolved over the years is, yes, we can educate people enough so that they identify reducing food waste and upcycling as a solution, and that as a core value, and wanting to support products that directly do that. That's you can do that. We've proven that you can do that. But you also can meet consumers where they already are, wanting delicious food that is more nutritious and at a competitive price point. And oh, by the way, this is made in a way that's upcycled. And that can be a reason for loyalty instead of a reason for purchase. And this idea of upcycling as an enabler for existing priorities, at the consumer level, is something that we've been spending a lot of time on recently. We have a customer, for example, that makes a keto-friendly bread. And that keto-friendly bread is keto-friendly in part because it's powered by the upcycled grain that we have that is very low in net carb, it's high in fiber, and a great source of plant protein. But they're not putting upcycled on the front of their package. And I like that example because it illustrates what I'm talking about here. We can try and create a new trend and tap into that and get more shelf space for products that are upcycled. And we should do that too. But also, where can we tap into existing demand? And there's a lot of potential for that, in food with upcycling, also with regenerative, which we didn't talk about much on this. And this also applies to fashion and to other sectors. I mean, there's even overlap with food waste reduction and sustainable materials. And there's companies that have created, like alternatives to leather, from fruit waste, for example. But that doesn't mean that every single consumer necessarily is going to want to buy a bag because it's made out of something that used to be a pineapple core or something like that. There may be some people, that do, but can we make like a really attractive bag that performs really well, that's at the right price point, and oh, by the way, it's also more sustainable? Well, then that's a reason to be more loyal to that. So that, that can apply to food, that can apply to anything in the sustainability world of like, how do we make that right thing the easy thing everywhere possible?
As a sustainability and upcycling expert, what are you seeing right now in the market that's interesting for those of us who know very little about this space, that is positive and hopeful? And what are you most excited about that's coming down the pipeline in terms of innovation?
Oh, I love this question. So first of all, I'll start with the not as heartening thing, and then lead into the more heartening thing. I mean, it's been a very challenging time for food innovation in the last, year. There was a report that Mintel just put out. I don't remember the exact figure, so I apologize to anyone listening. But it was a pretty dramatic, something like 35%, like pretty dramatic decrease in new product launches, in the last year. Validating to a certain extent because, we're seeing some of that out there with just like a slowdown in new product launches. That's not going to last forever. These things happen in cycles. And but like upstream from a product actually being launched, there's some really incredible innovation that's happening in the space. And where I tend to get the most excited is in this world of where there's something that would otherwise have been like a byproduct or a side stream that is being reimagined as a new input in a way that is doing what I was talking about in the previous answer of like meeting consumer demand where it already is. So one example that I learned about a year or so ago that I'm pretty excited about is from the cashew supply chain, for example. And the cashews grow actually, it's not really a nut in the way that most nuts are grown. It's like, have you ever seen a cashew fruit, Allie?
No.
We should put a picture of this in the show notes too.
I'll throw it up here.
Yeah, so a cashew fruit, it's like an apple, and then the cashew nut grows on the end of that. And that cashew apple, it turns out, like works really well as a 100% like plant-based meat alternative. Like it's not processed into something that is then like a meat analog or something that just kind of has a meaty texture. It has a nice nutritional profile, and it's like a whole fruit, whole vegetable kind of concept, minimally processed. So like I spent a lot of time at least like in this world of the future of food and really exciting food tech around mycelium based meats, like basically mushroom based meats, but like not like shiitake mushrooms, like actually cultivating like a protein using mycelium or using fermentation to produce proteins. And there's all this like kind of sci-fi food stuff that is like a reality today. And I think it's just a real breath of fresh air to also learn about, oh, hey, here's this like fruit that no one's really thought about before. And it actually like works really well in this application with minimal processing, that delivers like a excellent source of fiber. And so I guess actually in that I shared some other examples of future of food stuff. And, there's also things that I'm excited about on that end of the spectrum where there's an opportunity to rethink, how we're producing protein, for example. But a lot of those processes have the potential to use upcycled inputs, into them. So again, it's like maybe the priority is alternative proteins, right? But part of how those can come to market, is through inputs, that are sourced from upcycled streams instead of from virgin resources. And so I think there's a lot of excitement to be had there. And like for me too, another just like heartening thing that I'm really excited about is the opportunity that's best captured by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's framework for redesigning food to be nature positive, which would be another good show note for anyone who wants to nerd out about about this. That I think does a really nice job of capturing this idea that's been a passion of mine for a long time of like bringing regenerative agriculture and upcycling together. Upstream, the way that we're growing food and the respect for like biodiversity and sequestering carbon through different crops. There's all this like nerdy stuff that you probably don't want to get into right now with that, but regenerative agriculture and the way that we're growing food, and then with upcycling, making sure that the food that we are growing is going to its highest and best use for feeding people, that can be represented in a consumer product. So like a bread, for example, that's made with 80% regeneratively grown wheat that has all those benefits that I was just talking about, and 20% upcycled barley. And how amazing to put those two things together in a singular product that is, as the Ellen MacArthur Foundation framework, terms it is nature positive. So, really quite excited about kind of the marriage of some of these different mission-driven food innovation practices coming together and realizing that we're all kind of allies in the same thing. And so what can we do together, to advance solutions together?
What can we, those of us listening on the call who know very little about food science and sustainability and all those kinds of things who might not have the impact to help on the supply chain side of things or further upstream, what can we as the average consumer do to help reduce this number? Some people might have just learned about 40% waste today on this call
Yeah.
food industry.
Yeah, like 30 to 40% of that happens at home. So if you're someone who eats every day, and you're lucky enough to be someone who eats every day, which most people listening to this podcast probably, can check that box. Waste less food at home. And there's some very easy ways that you can do that. One is, other than the shameless plug of buying upcycled food products, right? Everyone should do that too. But just like simple things like meal planning are good for your budget and also really good for reducing food waste. Because, when you go to the store, not everyone, I've got another answer for people who are less kind of like type A, maybe how they grocery shop. But if you can make a list of all the meals you want to make, for the week and shop to that list and then make all of those things. So you're not going to have, the kind of back sad corner of your fridge with, wilting vegetables that you bought because you just were haphazardly throwing things into your cart without a real idea of what you're going to use them for. That's a very tactical strategy that anyone can implement, but maybe more of a mindset shift that people can have just by listening to this conversation and thinking about it when you're going to make a meal at home is instead of thinking, what do I want for dinner? Think to yourself, what do I have for dinner? And that will push you to maybe think like a chef a little bit. It doesn't have to be gourmet. It could be, I can't even tell you how many times I make omelets or, different types of stir fry, right? But with some really basic ingredients, like having, some good soba noodles or something like that on hand and some good sauces that you can use, you can clear out your fridge, just by thinking about what do I have for dinner? And you can do that with pizza, too, do different creative toppings. And there's lots of other tips that people can implement to reduce food waste at home. But, one of the big takeaways I'd love people to have is, just thinking about, what do I have for dinner? Versus what do I want for dinner? And then you can kind of bring those worlds together, reduce waste at home. And if you're in the industry, we'll focus on industry level solutions, but the aggregate of the individual action on this of food waste reduction at home could be hugely impactful.
We're approaching the end, so I like to ask everyone, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ask for help. Yeah. I got that one from my mom. She's always said it never hurts to ask, right? The worst thing that happens is you're in the same position you were before you asked, which is not having the thing that you're asking for, right? So, ask the question, ask for help.
We've covered a lot of ground today. Is there anything I haven't asked you that would be good for the audience to know?
We have covered a lot of ground today. So I'm just appreciative for the conversation. Thank you for having me on.
Oh my gosh, Dan, you are one of the most thoughtful, intellectual humans I know. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Plug yourself. Where can we find you? Where can we follow Upcycled and try every new product they're associated with, all the fun things?
Amazing. Thank you again. Anyone listening, I'm blushing. But the upcycledfoods.com is our website. We should do a better job on staying active on social media, honestly. But we are at Regrained or at Upcycled Foods Inc. You can find me personally on LinkedIn. I love to connect with people. Anyone who sorry to curse, but anyone who gives a shit. I want to hear from you. I support you on your journey, and you just never know what you can do together. So don't be shy.
Dan, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Super fun. Thank you, Allie.
And that wraps up another episode of Confessions of a Founder. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and took away valuable insights from our incredible guest. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this episode with someone in your life who could use a little entrepreneurial inspiration. We'll be back next Tuesday with another founder who's ready to share their story, their struggles, and the lessons they've learned along the way. So be sure to tune in, and until then, keep chasing your vision and embracing the journey. Thanks for listening.